Hey everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a deep dive and doing a full review of the Razer Deathadder V3 Wired Edition. Now, Razer as a whole has had a pretty rough past couple months. A lot of their products they've released have had some pretty bad QC issues. The Deathadder V3 Pro, which this mouse is based on, had a myriad of QC problems. The Razer Viper Mini SE Edition also is struggling from a lot of QC problems. Just generally, Razer's having a pretty rough time right now. And it looks like Razer is trying to break that cycle with the Deathadder V3 Wired Edition. Now, this version of the mouse is essentially a one-for-one clone of the Deathadder V3 Pro, obviously with a wire instead of being a wireless version and for significantly cheaper. This one is going to be coming in at $69.99 USD, where the V3 Pro is going to be coming in at $159.99 USD. The big differences here is that Razer, according to what they've said, they have fixed a lot of the issues with how this mouse feels in the hand, which was one of the biggest complaints I personally had about the Deathadder V3 Pro. On top of that, they have also integrated an 8K native polling rate over the wired connection. For those of you who didn't watch my video about the V3 Pro, I basically said the mouse was pretty much perfect. It just had so many Achilles heels of just really poor design decisions, and I'm hoping Razer actually fixed a lot of those problems. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. As always, if you're looking for a specific topic, I will have timestamps down in the description. You can go ahead and find those there if you're looking for a specific topic. For testing methodology, I used the stock Deathadder V3 wired. I'm using a bungee, of course, as I highly recommend for any wired mouse. The only change I made to the mouse overall is I added grip tape, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I did leave the stock skates on the product as well, so there are not third-party skates on here as well. This is pretty much as stock as you can get. I was running 40 centimeter per 360 at 1600 DPI at 1K polling rate. I did test the 4, 2, and 8K polling rates, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then for mouse pads I used for the majority of my testing, I was using the IKEA Lensblur Black and the TJ exclusive Sarah pad. In terms of weight, there's going to be a very small reduction in weight coming from the V3 Pro to the V3 Wired. The V3 Wired is going to be coming in at 59 grams, which is a 4-gram weight drop from the wireless edition. I had a feeling there was going to be a higher weight reduction coming from the Pro to this one because, again, you don't have to deal with the wireless battery or the wireless PCB, but I do believe that some of that weight has been attributed to making the shell a little more rigid, and also, of course, the cable also adds some factors to that, but overall, not a huge reduction in weight. Now, since the V3 is a wired mouse, having a cable is obviously going to affect the weight balancing of this mouse. So you can see here that this is ever so slightly top heavy. Now, this is mainly just due to just the extra weight from having the cable connection at the top here. It doesn't really affect how it feels on the mouse pad itself. Like, I don't feel like the top drags more than the back does. I don't feel like the cables hampers my movements in any way. The only time I really feel any drag is if I'm dragging the mouse too far and I run out of bungee space. But again, as long as you give this enough flex, you should be completely fine. One of the Achilles heels on the Deathadder V3 Pro was the build quality. Specifically, there was a very odd flexing just in between this area of the mouse. It was a very odd, just kind of creaking issue. Now, thankfully, Razer has rectified that in this version. I will say this thing is built like an absolute tank. Even death gripping this thing, there is no creaking of any kind. You shake the mouse, there's nothing aside from the clicks if you hit them too hard. The mouse is built like a truck. And again, I wish this was how the build quality was on the Pro edition, but overall build quality is great. Zero issues with that, zero QC, zero flexing, absolutely nothing. This thing is built perfectly. It actually reminds me a lot of the Keychron M3, which is one mouse I've been using a lot as of late. This thing is also just built like an absolute tank, and it reminds me a lot of this. So, but obviously this one's a lot heavier. So props to Razer for having such good build quality on the wired edition. Another area Razer has also rectified a lot of issues with is in terms of the stock skates. Now, when I did my review of the V3 Pro, my set of stock skates, the PTFE ones, were just awful. They were super scratchy. They were really hard. They just dragged on everything. I wasn't even using a hard pad at the time. I was using my IKEA Lensblur, if I'm not mistaken, and it just felt terrible. Razer has obviously taken note of that. They have actually fixed the stock skates, and they feel really good. I don't know. I must have just gotten a bad unit on my version, but the stock skates here are completely fine. I actually left them on for the total duration of my review here, and I still have the stock ones on to this day. So whatever issues were happening with the skates on the first version have completely gone away. Being a wired mouse, the experience of this mouse is going to be completely set by the cable, and thankfully Razer has paid very close attention to the quality of this cable. Now, the V3's cable is what they are returning the Razer SpeedFlex cable, which is the exact same cable that was included with the V3 Pro for charging. However, this one is a lot more rigid, really solid. I haven't had any issues with it. In my opinion, this is a perfect implementation. Now, of course, I am using a bungee, which is going to negate any possible effects I would have on this one. So again, I highly recommend use a bungee, but even if you don't have one, the cable implementation is really solid. I don't have any problems with it. The one thing I would have liked to see is on the Zowie mice that came out before the wireless versions. I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head, but I don't remember them right now. They had a tilted cable right here. So this would arch up about like 45 degrees, give or take, maybe like 50. That would be nice to see on this mouse. But again, with how good the cable implementation is, it's not necessary, but it would have been something nice to see. Again, the mouse is only $69.99 USD, so I'm not really going to dock any points for that. But overall, cable implementation is fantastic. I've had zero problems with it, zero drag, no matter what pad I'm using, even if I don't have the bungee, zero problems at all. Very, very, very good job done for Razer here. They did a fantastic job with the cable. Yet another area Razer made a lot of improvements on the Deathadder V3 wired as opposed to the Pro is going to be in the coating. Now, the coating on the V3 Pro was really flawed. It was a rough surface, but basically had like zero texture. I don't know why that was like that. Razer has apparently changed that, and they're debuting a new coating on the Deathadder V3 wired, which is this kind of softer, almost matte-esque coating, but it's very grippy. Now, I do have sweatier hands, so I did end up installing grip tape on the mouse at the end of the day just because I feel a lot more comfortable with grip tape. Most people will be completely fine with the default coating on this one. I know a lot of people complained about the coating on the V3 Pro. This is a significant improvement. The area where the Deathadder V3 and the V3 Pro differ the most is the changes that Razer has made to the shell. Now, for those of you watching my video about the V3 Pro, you'll be very familiar with what I said about it. I basically said that the V3 Pro felt like a very, very, very slightly tilted GPX that you held like a sim mouse, but was advertised as an ergo. Overall, just the feeling was terrible. And the way the arch of the mouse was designed, I had to do this hyper aggressive claw grip where I had to rest the base of my hand all the way up here and kind of hold the mouse like this, which needless to say is incredibly uncomfortable. But Razer has actually changed a lot of things about the mouse and actually fixed that issue. So first of all, they have raised the overall arch of the mouse just by a bit. By doing so, they have increased the tilt of the mouse quite a bit. Now, this does make a huge change for claw grippers. So I can naturally hold this mouse no problem now, and I feel like I can kind of rest the base of my palm right against here. It feels very comfortable. But if you have medium hands, you'll be able to palm, and if you have medium to large, you'll be able to claw grip this mouse with zero problems. Another change that they've made is they've also changed the scroll wheel a little bit. Now, I wasn't really able to verify the change to the scroll wheel between a lot of 3D models I looked at. I really didn't see too much of a difference. I think they've just ever so slightly recessed it into the shell just a tiny little bit, but I can't confirm that, unfortunately. Another thing they changed is they changed the positioning of the side buttons here. Now, the side buttons used to be a little more up and they used to be back in the shell a little bit. Now they are a little indented forward and they are just moved forward in the shell just a tiny little bit. Now, this does help a lot for, again, claw gripping, where on the previous mouse, it was very difficult to hit the button. Like, I'd have to move my thumb all the way back here to hit the side buttons. You don't have to do that anymore. You only have to go about here. I don't really use side buttons because, again, my hands are so big. I often have a hard time hitting them. For medium to large hands, you will most likely have zero problems with this. It'll be completely fine. One other small change Razer made is they added what they call a ring finger ledge right here on the mouse. Now, I personally didn't really find a ledge here. They added it to improve the claw grip to make it easier to kind of hold your fingers against here. Realistically speaking, I don't think this change was really required. Grip tape fixes that problem entirely. I don't think it's necessary. Again, I really didn't feel a difference between the two models. One other big thing that I did notice that Razer didn't really talk about is the fingerprint indents on the main clicks have actually been changed as well. The fingerprint divots are significantly less recessed on these ones when they were on the Pro. Now, this again doesn't really change the overall feeling in the mouse. I actually feel like it's a little better because it gives you a little more freedom for different grip styles and different hand sizes. All these changes I just listed are what really fixed the Deathadder V3 in my opinion. The shell on the V3 Pro was so flawed and had so many problems. All those are fixed now, and the mouse feels great. I would love to see Razer actually take all of these design changes they've done to the V3 and apply to the V3 Pro. If the V3 Pro had this shell, it would be a completely different story. That mouse would be a million times better in my opinion. My only point of critique would have been the implementation of the polling rate, but because the shell was so flawed, it just ruined the entire thing for me. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that Razer takes this shell exactly with all the changes they've made and put it on the Pro. That would make that mouse a million times better. When I heard that Razer was releasing a Deathadder V3, a cheaper version of the Pro edition, I had a feeling Razer was going to cut some corners with the specifications, and I was completely wrong, which means you are going to be getting the exact same Focus Pro 30K sensor, you're going to be getting the same side buttons, the same scroll wheel encoder, you're going to get the same Gen 3 Razer optical switches for the main clicks, which feel amazing. The scroll wheel issue also has been resolved from the V3 Pro, which is great to see, and overall this mouse just feels fantastic. One area I really haven't talked a lot about, which is the selling point on the Razer Deathadder V3, in my opinion, is the default 8K polling rate over the wired connection. Now, unlike the V3 Pro, where you had to purchase a separate dongle to utilize the wireless 4K, it is just included in the box at the $69.99 USD price. A lot of people are going to look at this mouse and say, ooh, 8K polling rate, biggest number, biggest rock, best rock. Understandable. Personally speaking, I care more about the shape changes than the 8K polling rate. And the reason for that is because I was not able to test the high polling rate. Now, there is is a myriad of issues of why I was not able to test it. Number one, I have an older CPU, which really does not like high rate repolling over USB. Number two, I'm running an older version of Windows 10, which has a very weird issue with the USB scheduling issue, which is causing some very high intermittent issues on my polling rate and just a myriad of other things. The unit itself is completely fine. I have no problems with it, but I will say if you are interested in utilizing that 4K, 8K polling rate, I would highly recommend you do some research into your system before you purchase it, because again, hardware outside of 4 or 5 years will probably not be like the high polling rate too much. Now that said though, I did use this on 1K polling rate for the majority of my testing. The 1K polling rate is completely fine in my opinion, no issues there, and if I do get the polling rate issue resolved, I will post a separate video about that down the line. Now, one area I do have to critique Razer on here is going to be their software. Now the product itself is completely fine, but Razer Synapse is a bloated piece of garbage. Mel software has gotten so unbelievably bloated, it's disgusting. I wish every single company would go the Keychron or Vaxi way where you have onboard device buttons. Please just stop making us install this over bloated Mel software to use mice, please. We don't need it. Thank God Razer thought about that a little bit here and gave us a bit of a break. So this mouse does actually have 5 onboard memory profiles, so you can configure different polling rates, keybinds, etc. per profile, and you can change it via this little button on the bottom here. Now again, Razer Synapse is a piece of garbage. Install it, configure the mouse, set your profiles, uninstall it, never touch it again. If you have Synapse on your PC, make sure it is disabled on startup because it will just hog system resources like crazy. Razer, please make a lightweight version of Synapse so we do not have to deal with this bloated piece of crap software, because Mel software is just terrible, please. Alrighty, and my little rant of Razer software out of the way, I will have to say overall I am really impressed with the Deathadder V3. Razer has done a really good job at kind of breaking the cycle of the recent subpar product releases, and I'm very happy to say this is a really good mouse, borderline perfect in my opinion. Now the one problem is that with Razer releasing such a good mouse, they have made a bit of a mistake where they have kind of inadvertently made the Deathadder V3 Pro irrelevant and obsolete. I really don't see a single reason why you should spend an extra 100 USD to buy a wireless version with a worse polling rate implementation and a worse shell. Even if Razer updates the shell design on the V3 Pro to match the Deathadder wired, it's still worse. You could buy 2 Deathadder wired for the price of getting 1 wireless one, and I really don't think the wireless is that good right now. If you're going to run this mouse as your next mouse for the next 3 years, the Deathadder V3 wireless, you're going to have to buy the separate dongle and it caps it at 4K. You're going to have the battery issues. You're going to have all these other issues that happen with wireless high polling rate mice. Whereas the wired version, it just works. You get the native 8K polling rate, you get the 4K polling rate, you get everything you want out of the Deathadder for a cheaper price and arguably a better shell. Now, I definitely am going to hear a bunch of comments about people saying, oh, well, wireless tech is the same as wired, and oh, well, the wire impacts my performance. If you're one of those people who say a wire impacts your performance and you can't perform the same between a wireless and a wired mouse, that is the human definition of a skill issue. If you can't use a wireless mouse and a wired mouse at the same level, you got other problems, bro. Overall, this is an incredibly good mouse. Again, I will recommend if you are interested in utilizing the 8K polling rate and the 4K or 2K, I would highly recommend you go ahead and research your system specs beforehand, because you may be in a similar boat as me where you cannot utilize that, but in the future, you may be able to utilize it a little bit more. Again, very happy with it. It will be receiving the mel0n seed of approval, because this is, yeah, you know what, I'm going to say it. This is a perfect mouse. I really genuinely think that this is a perfect mouse. This joins the very exclusive club I have right now of this and the Vaxi Outset AX as just being the 2 perfect mice in my opinion. There is a very solid mouse. I highly recommend you pick this one up. If you have medium hands, this is a great palm mouse. If you have bigger hands, this is a great claw mouse. This is a fantastic product. Highly recommend you guys pick this up. If you're interested in learning more about it, the product link will be down in the description. Another thing I forgot to mention, you'll also be very interested to see how this mouse will hold up against the other 8K mice coming to the market. I know Pulsar has their ES series mice coming to the market later this year. I believe HyperX is also having their HyperX Pulsefire 2 come very soon as well, which is going to have also 8K polling by default. It'll be interesting to see how it compares against those. Of course, the Pulsefire Haste is a sim mouse. This is an ergo, so 2 kind of different things, but it'll be interesting to see how the performance kind of holds up between both of them. If you're looking for a good ergo mouse, good quality, great price value, and just great performance, the Deathadder V3 is probably your good to go as of right now in 2023. All right, and as always, thank you again for watching. Greatly appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future review content coming up soon. I will have some content about the Pulsefire Haste 2 coming up very soon. I'm very excited to get my hands on that mouse, and again, it'll be very interesting to see how it compares to this guy. Guys, subscribe so you don't miss any of that going forward. And again, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about the product or any kind of other things that didn't answer in my review, go ahead and leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to answer as many as I can. But anyways, that's pretty all for today. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.